Welcome everyone to another moment with the mayor. Today I'm really excited to have community leader and friend Crystal Brakke on. Hi Crystal, thank you for joining us. And before we talk a little bit about how COVID has been impacting the public schools, can you just talk about who you are and introduce yourself to the community and what your role is?
Sure, I'm excited to be here. I am a member of the Richfield School Board. I am in my 5th year on the board, and I'm just ending my 2nd year as school board chair.
Thank you for that. So, the topic that is on everyone's mind, of course, is COVID-19 and the impact that it's having. And we're doing everything we can at the city and across the community to make sure that everyone is cautious and actually over precautious with their COVID-19, what they're doing to protect themselves and their families. So can you talk a little bit about your personal experience with COVID?
Sure. I was in New York City in mid-March and have described how it felt like I flew to New York City for a couple fun days and the world changed while I was there. And so it was in those couple of days that you started to see a few more people wearing masks in the subway. And the lines in the drugstores and the bodegas getting longer and longer, and everybody trying to find hand sanitizer and it not being anywhere. But it appears likely that I contracted COVID while I was in New York City. Maybe while I was standing in one of those lines in a shop trying to find hand sanitizer. But after getting back home to Richfield, I started getting what I would describe as the telltale symptoms. And it was about a week later. And because it was so early in the pandemic, it was at the point in time where the state of Minnesota did not have the tests to go around that we fortunately do have now. So it was when tests really were limited to healthcare workers and to people who were, critically ill. And fortunately, I was not critically ill. I was uncomfortable. I did not feel good, but I was okay. And so I had the experience of feeling, relatively confident that this is probably what I had. But no way to actually know for sure because I didn't want to use a test that really should have been going to somebody else. So I stayed at home. I tried to stay safe and tried to keep other people around me safe. And then a couple of months later was able to get antibody tests done through my primary care physician at Richfield Medical Group. And so it was, through that I got that initial test result that coupled with my symptoms and my time in New York City gave the doctor confidence that, yes, you almost certainly actually had COVID-19. And so what that then enabled me to do was to begin donating my antibodies through plasma. And actually, every time I did that, they also tested. And every time it came back positive for the antibodies. So that more than anything is what I think finally confirmed that, yes, that sickness that I had in mid-March was actually the virus itself.
Wow, I did not realize that you got it so early, and I imagine that was a little bit scary too. We didn't know as much as we do now, and there was not access to so much information and testing, like you said. Wow.
Yeah, it was a little unnerving because it was not totally clear what I should be doing to keep people safe other than to just stay home. And ultimately, that is still the answer. Stay home, protect yourself. But, this was before masks were normalized and we had a better sense of how to proactively keep each other safe.
And what was your recovery like? And what would you say to people now who we see people not taking the precautions today still that they need to take? So what was your recovery like and what would you say to folks?
Yeah, my recovery fortunately was relatively fine. I was certainly sick for a number of weeks. There were a couple of days where I felt really unwell. Fortunately, again, never enough that I needed to seek out medical care, but those were the days where I felt like, my breathing was a little bit more labored. The body aches were a little bit more intense. And fortunately, I was able to just, work through that at home. And it just took time. And I realized I was incredibly fortunate because even though I was experiencing symptoms, they were still mild in comparison to what we know this virus can do for people. And so, you know, my reaction when there are people who minimize the risk or don't want to take the steps that our public health officials are recommending is one of just sadness, honestly, and frustration, because I think what we can do right now is focus on the collective good and what can we as individuals do to help care for each other and to help care for our community. And it's pretty clear what we can do. We can wear a mask. We can maintain the physical distance from one another. We can stay home when we don't feel well. We can get tested when we don't feel well. These are not difficult steps to take, and they save lives. And so what I really hope that people will do is try to stay centered on that collective good, and that they don't have to experience it in their personal life or have tragedy in their personal life in order to actually make it real.
Absolutely. I saw a commercial recently that really, I love how it shifted the narrative. We keep saying that our healthcare workers are on the front lines, but really, they're our last chance of health and wellness and even surviving. And it's us, our residents, our families, us as individuals who are on the front lines of this, and just putting that responsibility back on us because it does start with us. So, absolutely, I completely agree with that. And now switching to the impact that this has had on the schools. So this is now the second school year that we have been facing COVID. There's been a lot of learning lessons. How are our students, our families, our communities in the schools doing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was also just thinking of, for people who are minimizing the risk, gosh, I wish they could just have a conversation with one of our high school students right now. We are fortunate to have 3 current high school students on our school board as student representatives. And I wish I could play for people some of the questions that they have been asking. They are incredibly resilient. They have adapted just remarkably to this reality that we are in. And they still want to know, what are our dances going to be like in the spring? Am I going to be able to play my team sport still this year? What does graduation look like? And those are the questions that our kids are sitting with. We can make this better for our kids by adults changing their behavior.
Absolutely.
And that is what I hope we can also stay centered on. But to get back to your question, the school year so far has been, one of tremendous flexibility and change. We were able to start the year by having students in all distance learning, if that's what they and their families chose. And we were able to have some students in person in a hybrid learning model. And then that changed in recent weeks, and we are back to all distance learning for all of our students in Richfield Public Schools. So it has required just tremendous flexibility on the part of our staff, who are adapting, it feels like, every day and every week to the circumstances around us. And obviously for our students and our families, this has a radical impact on their life. What school looks like at home is obviously significantly different than what it looks like when you are in a physical building, whether it's full time or whether it's a couple of days a week. And so I think, we are all managing through this change as best we can. We know that there are things that can be better and can be different, and we're trying to work on those things in real time, while at the same time just honoring how difficult it is for everyone and trying to give space for people to just process and feel how hard this is. Right. And the reality that our public schools are in the middle of this. And that's not where we want to be. We want to be able to have our schools be a safe place for kids to come every day, but unfortunately that's not possible right now.
Right. One thing that I've seen with the pandemic, and I see it so strongly in our Richfield Public Schools, is the way that everybody has come together to fill in gaps, to fill in needs, to be super creative and just jump in and help where needed. And we're really fortunate to have Mary Supple, who's a teacher in our public schools here in Richfield, on the city council with us. And she has just shared story after story of how the teachers have come together, how they were realizing that it wasn't necessarily always issues with students, but it was just technology, basic technology issues that were really affecting outcomes for kids. And then, the teachers and the staff coming together and pretty much saying, all right, who can cover these kids? Who can make sure that we check in on a very regular basis with these families? And everyone, I mean, the schools always go above and beyond. The staff always does, the teachers do. But just to see that happening again, and just to see the difference that it makes, and how through that process we are finding ways to still build that sense of community, that connectivity. I know that Richfield Public Schools has been doing such a great job to make sure that there's meals for our families and our students and for the adults in our community. So I would say the school district is just a shining example, as it always is, of going above and beyond to build community and take care of not just the students' education needs, but the whole family. And we see that again with COVID. So I thank you for your role in that, and to all of the staff out there, all of the families, all the teachers for their great work. Now, everyone always wants to know what precautions are being taken. So what are some of the precautions being taken right now for the students and families?
Yeah. Well, when we started the school year and did have some students and staff physically in buildings learning together, we did a lot of things around just physical space precautions. So things around how many students per classroom and how students got off and on the school bus and how many students could be on a school bus at a time. We also passed a mask policy as a school district that was very clear and governed what we expected for anybody in our Richfield Public Schools as far as masks. So we were able to do some of those physical precautions early in the school year. And I think, what's amazing is truly how quickly kids adapt to this. I was able to visit one of our in-person summer school sites over the summer, and it just was second nature to our kids already. And so that is, as always, a helpful lesson, that kids are often much more flexible and adaptable than we as adults are, or that we give kids credit for. So we were able to do some of those physical changes, immediately. And then we also knew that we needed to leave space for some of the social and emotional health of our students and our staff, and actually giving space for people to talk about, what is this feeling like? What do you need? What does it look like for you to stay safe and healthy, both in school, but also in community? And so really making sure that there was dedicated time for those conversations. And now that we are back to all distance learning, continuing space for those conversations and having intentional ways for people to check in with each other about how you're doing. What do you need? What does your family need? And how can we as a district support you in having those needs met? You mentioned the food. That's something that is obviously critically important. And I hope anyone watching who is in need of food or knows somebody who might be, will go to the Richfield Schools website, richfieldschools.org, and look to see how you can pick up food. There are 7-day bundles. There are bundles of food available for adults, no questions asked, at schools all across our community. And we really want and need people to take advantage of that because it's there for them. And again, no questions asked. And then I would say one of the other things that we're doing now to continue to stay focused on safety and wellness is helping our kids stay connected to their athletics and their activities, even though those are not things that are happening in person right now. We know how important that is for emotional well-being. And so having teams and having groups actually still come together virtually and be able to provide coaching and support that way is another thing that's really important right now.
Wow. I love hearing all the different ways. There's physical things that you've done, there's ways to continue building community, but then also meeting the needs on multiple levels of everybody involved at the district. That's so great to hear. And lastly, we get to start this process that we've been waiting for and saying goodbye to 2020 and hello to 2021. So what thoughts are you having? What are the hopes that you have for 2021? I've been particularly proud of your leadership and of our superintendent's leadership and other conversations we've been in with communities across Minnesota, with other superintendents, other chairs of school boards, and other mayors across Minnesota. And you have been very vocal, and we have been united in a community saying we do not want to go back to the way things were. Things are completely inequitable. Things are benefiting the way that things were. They were benefiting some and really disenfranchising so many. And Richfield is really leading the way and saying, we need to do things differently. This has only escalated, exacerbated that need, and we're not going back. We're going to do better. So what thoughts do you have for 2021?
Yeah. Well, and I first thank you. And I feel grateful that we are really aligned as the school district, as a city, and I think as a community about what we want to be true for our kids and what we want them to experience in our schools. And like you said, we know that not all kids were having the experiences that we would want them to have in our schools. And what the pandemic has done is interrupted that. And I think a lot about how there are kids for whom this has been a gift because they are not in a school or maybe in a classroom that does not actually feel safe for them or does not feel affirming for them or is not flexible enough to meet the needs of them and of their family. And so exactly as you said, I'm really trying to stay centered on the question, how do we not just go back to the same system that we had before when we know that it was not working for all of our kids, and in particular is not working for our most marginalized students and families. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard to do when we're also just trying to make it through every day, when our staff are just trying to adapt and ensure that what we are doing now is meeting the needs of our students. So I think it's both focusing on the short term and getting better on what we're doing and providing as far as education on a day-to-day basis, while leaving space for the bigger and more visionary work of how do we reimagine systems? How do we reimagine school and deeply involve our students, our families, our staff in really thinking about those big questions. And one of the things that we've actually been able to do is shift our timeline for our district's next strategic plan so that we actually did give more time this spring, summer, and fall to have some of those conversations. So this next strategic plan that is going to start in 2021 is actually reflective of what we have all collectively been going through for the last year, what we have been learning, what we have been feeling. And so I hope that that will be a start to this and will be a start to us asking the questions and prioritizing the actions that are going to lead to a different school for our kids and for our community that hopefully will be one that feels like it is centered in what they need and what they want from us in Richfield Public Schools.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Crystal, for joining me, and thank you for your tremendous leadership and partnership in Richfield. It's always so great to work with you and to hear all the amazing things that are going on in our public schools. Thank you for joining me.